The first of what we hope is going to be a series of mini programmes where governors talk a little bit about themselves and about the journey that they've travelled to become a school governor. My name's Chris Beswick, I'm a governor at Melland, and today I'm talking to Peter Tite, who is the chair of the Melland local governing body. So Peter, first of all, let me say thank you for taking time off. We know how busy you are to have this conversation. We really do appreciate it. So we'll go straight in. We're all very much shaped by the place that we live in and the people that are around us as we grow up. Tell us something about those early days in your childhood and your family, and perhaps how you think they made you the person that you became later in some ways.
A very good opening question. Well, it's interesting actually, especially with being a governor at Melland, because I grew up in East Manchester, which is not far from where Melland is. My high school was actually St Gregory's in Higher Openshaw, which is, again, quite close to Gorton. And I actually used to, one of the things that I was really into as a child was music. So I played guitar. And every Saturday, when I was sort of teenage years, sort of 12, 13, 14, I used to come for an extra guitar lesson in, I can't remember the name of the school, but it's very, very close to Melland. So I kind of...
St Albans.
It probably was St Albans.
Yeah.
Looking back, I knew, as an adult, I knew of St Albans.
Yeah, right next to the old Melland building.
Yeah. So that route, I know really well, the turn off from every Saturday when I was a child. So it's got a lot of resonance for me in that way. I obviously St Gregory's was a local school. When I started high school, the system in Manchester had just changed. So before that, there was a test at 11 where my elder brothers and sisters, because I come from quite a big family, they would have gone to either grammar schools or secondary moderns. And I was the first generation where it was fully comprehensive, the system. So I was the first one really to go to a comprehensive school where you have all sorts of different children at the school. Some who are very high achieving in terms of academic studies, others who need quite a bit of support but have talents in other areas. So I think that's shaped me quite a lot because I really believe in those types of schools. And I think everybody benefits if you go to schools like that. And we've sent our children to the local comprehensive as well, even though we had choices to do other things, and we believe in that as well. And our children have done very, very well from that too. And I think that certainly shaped me, and one of the reasons why I really enjoy being involved with Melland, because certainly from my family background and the beliefs of the family, I think it's a strong belief that everybody is an individual who's to be valued and respected, and that everybody's got their own special talents. And I really do believe that. And every student in Melland has their own talents. And we see that as governors going around and interacting and looking at them, learning and listening to the students. And I think that that's been quite important in my life.
Thinking back to those St Greg's days then, were you a model student? I mean, destined to be a teacher, were you a model student, or perhaps not?
I don't know about that. Generally, as a rule of thumb, I think teachers tend to have been naughty children themselves, from what I can gather. I wasn't actually that naughty. I probably was a bit of a model student in some ways. But I didn't always do as well academically as I should have done. I didn't do as well at my A-levels as I should have done, really. And I did better when I went to university. So I've had times when I've struggled with my learning, I think, and times when I've done better with it. I think I'm probably somebody who's can learn things quite well. I'm quite interested in things and I read quite a lot. But I was never always as good at working and revising for examinations all the time. So I have a lot of empathy. I understand a lot when children struggle, because everybody struggles a little bit at school. I don't think there's anybody who goes to school and it's all just plain sailing. And for people who do, to be honest with you, they probably find it a shock later. because there always comes a point in everyone's life where you get setbacks. And I think that's important to learn from them when you're young, because that builds your character. So I wasn't bad, I think. I was always quite good. The thing that stood out, I think, was I was always quite good at speeches. That was the one thing in English that they always pointed out, that I was always sort of top of the class by some way when we had to do speeches and presentations. So I was good at speaking and listening, I think. Others were probably maybe a little bit better at me than other things, just reading and writing, things like that. But speeches I was always very good at. And I think in a way that probably led me into teaching, because I was always good at standing up in front of people and holding an audience. I was quite good at that. So yeah, probably a little bit of a swat at school, but not a successful one, which probably is the worst possible combination.
And could I ask, was there a background in your family of going to university, or?
Well, not really at my parents' or grandparents' generation. They didn't get to go to university, unfortunately. I think they both would have loved to. But in those days, there wasn't really, it was very, very different. Not as many people went to university. So in those days, unless you were from a background and had a lot of money in the family, you probably didn't get the opportunity to. So my grandparents on both sides were probably, were doing ordinary kind of working class jobs, I'd say. My dad was very successful. He became an accountant and then became a director in the company that he worked for. So he was very successful in his career, but never got a chance to go to university. And I think he said to me a few times he would have loved that. When he retired, he got very into learning languages. He spoke a few languages. So he studied them throughout his life. He spoke French and German, but he really developed that when he retired. That became a big passion, where he had adult classes and improved his German in particular. So you always learn, don't you? Carry on learning. Right. But my elder, I've got a lot of elder brothers and sisters and cousins. So a lot of those have been to, not all, but a lot of those have been to university. So I was nowhere near the first. But so there was a tradition within my brothers and sisters and cousins to go to university, but not necessarily the generation before that. No.
So off for the young Peter, excuse me, off to university. Did you, when you started at university, was teaching always something that you had in mind, or did that
absolutely not?
When you were there?
No. I was still a little bit of a dreamer when I went to university, and I played guitar, and I was very obsessive about playing guitar and writing songs. So I was fully intending to be successful in a band and be successful. We came quite close, actually, because I was at university for 3 years, and then afterwards I stayed on. I went to university in Hull, so I stayed on for 3 years and worked. I worked in a bookshop, but I also played in a band, and we were very, very serious about it. And we came quite close to getting a record contract. And that was always my ambition, to be honest with you. But when that fizzled out after about 3 years, we realised that it was time to go our separate ways and do different things. At that point, because I was working in the bookshop, I started reading a lot about different careers. And a number of my brothers and sisters and brothers-in-law were teachers. So that my generation, where there's a lot of us were in education, to be honest with you. So I think that in some ways that put me off a little bit, I think, because it was their thing. I didn't want to just follow them. But I knew deep down, I think, that it will be something that I will probably be quite good at. Thinking back to my school days, that I was good at speaking, and I think I could do that. Interesting, the one thing that I remember really clearly, though, was in the bookshop, because it was an academic bookshop at a university that I worked at, and I was responsible for the education section. So I read quite a few of the education books before I actually started. So I think I was probably interested in the ideas behind education before actual teaching, because I'd read quite a lot of it. And one I do remember is that there was one where a book where it talks about different jobs in the school. And there was a chapter where there was a head of English who wrote about their day and described what their day was like. And that, I think, was the time when I thought for sure I would definitely want to do this. So oddly, I think I was probably more interested in leadership in school than actual teaching. When I started, I was interested in teaching, but I kind of knew from the start, the thing that really appealed to me was reading about that day, that person's day, and all the variety of things that they did. I didn't mind working in a bookshop, but it was boring, and I think that's what I found. The days dragged. Listening to that person's day, one thing in teaching is it's never boring. It's always, the days go very, very quickly in teaching because you've got to juggle lots of things. But I was interested in leading people as well. I think I got a lot of satisfaction from that.
That is interesting, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people go into teaching and they see themselves as a kind of Mr. Chips figure, who will go on all those years. But other people then take a different path as you did. So, as you say, head of department, deputy head. What was it appeal then, that next step? Because not everybody wants to go from deputy to head. I think especially these days. What was it that appealed about their headship for you?
To be honest with you, I never really intended that. I always thought head of English was probably the job I wanted to do. My second school I was at, because I started off at the school in Stockport, and then I moved to Parswood in Manchester and Didsbury. Now, when I was there, I had a number of leadership roles, leading partly for gifted and talented, which is students who are academically very able. So I was leading work with them, but I was very clear that the next step I wanted was head of English. I could have actually made a jump at that point to assistant head teacher, and I did discuss that with the deputy head at the time. But I really wanted to lead a team. So I wanted to have actual responsibility for a team of teachers and supporting and leading them. But then once I did head of English for 4 years, I was at a school near Liverpool in Sefton, and I really enjoyed that. It's very intensive. I always say it's one of the hardest jobs in a school because you're very, very hands-on and busy. Just like that book I read all those years before, it is very intensive and it's hard work. And after 4 years, I think I was just ready for another challenge, really. And I wanted more time to devote more time to leadership rather than teaching. Because when you're head of English, you're still teaching pretty much full time. So that was it. But I never really thought of headship. And the school I moved to in Manchester, Loretto, at the time, it was struggling quite a bit. It was the local school. It was the one I sent my children to eventually. And I knew it was where I wanted them to go. So in some ways, it was an exciting challenge because it was going to a school where you could actually make a difference in your local community. So that was a really exciting challenge moving there as deputy. And then as that went on, it just became more natural to move on from deputy to headship, really. I realised that I could do that and really enjoyed it.
Great. Now, heads have more than enough to do, Peter. So what is it that made you want to then become a governor at Melland High School and take on even more work?
No.
What was the attraction there?
Well, that was an unusual one because when you do your training for headship, as you know, you do a course. It was called the MPQH, so the National Professional Qualification for Headship. Now, as part of that course, you have to do a placement at another school. So when I was on the course doing it, I discussed with them where I would like to go for another school. Now, all I said to them was that I would like to go to an outstanding school. So I wanted to go to a school where it was really functioning at the top of its game, if you like, because I wanted to learn from the very, very best. They assigned Melland to me. Now, it was a very different school, Melland, obviously, because of the children it serves have some different challenges, a lot of them. So it was different from the school I was at. So that was a bit of a challenge for me because I wasn't too sure at first whether I would be able to help. Because one of the things you have to do when you go to the school is lead a project at the school. And I was very nervous about that because it was very different from the school that I was at. And I didn't know whether I would be able to actually lead anything there. So I went and got to know the team at Melland. So this was before I was a governor. and got talking to them and started leading a project, working with the leaders there. I led a project on work scrutiny, so about looking at the work that children do and seeing if it's at the right standards. And I met with a number of the staff. It was a challenging project, but I learned lots from it. And it really took me out of my comfort zone. And I think I got a lot from that. Excuse me. So when I was doing that, I also, after being involved with them for a year and finished my MPQH, the school then asked me, would I stay on working on the impact group, which, as you know, is the group that looks at the improvements of the school and monitors that at the time. So I agreed to do that. And then again and said that they had a vacancy on the governing body. Now, by that time, I think I was very comfortable at Melland and really liked it. I really loved the atmosphere at Melland. I felt very at home there. And also, I felt I was always learning things, partly learning about a school that's very different to my own, and learning about how we can support children who have very different needs and to see how they can thrive and prosper. So I learned a lot that way. But also, I learned a lot about leadership because Melland's been blessed with some excellent head teachers, principals and vice principals over the years. And I've learned a lot from them in terms of how you lead schools and how you lead change and improvement. So to be honest with you, by that point, I was quite happy to stay involved, and I saw it as a way of staying involved. I never planned to be chair of the local governing body. But then when there was a vacancy, they asked me, I decided to give that a go and see how it went. But I'm also now, I've enjoyed governance as well, because you see school from a different angle. As you know, you're not responsible for doing leadership decisions and making things happen, but you're responsible for asking the questions. And that's actually really, similar to the job that your professional job really, isn't it? You get to have a taste of that. As well as doing your own job. So I find that really interesting, where you're the one asking the questions rather than the one who's responsible for making the change happen.
Yeah. Good. And if anybody was watching this, Peter, thinking of becoming a school governor, what would be your advice to them? Would it be to find out more about it, or?
I would do, definitely. Yeah, I would certainly encourage it. I think that I'm on two school governing bodies now. One's a primary school as well. The primary school was struggling more when I joined, and there was probably more work, not with me personally, but I know for the chair and the vice chair, they had a lot of work to do initially at that school. It's now an outstanding school and it's doing brilliantly. So both schools I'm on now are outstanding. So in some ways, when you're at an outstanding school, you still got to make sure that you stay outstanding and ask the challenging questions and help the school to keep inviting experts from outside to come in and challenge, which I know Melland are excellent at. And that's how schools stay outstanding. Schools that stop doing that tend to slip, because if you're not asking anybody to come from outside to look at you, then you can end up becoming a bit stuck in your ways. But there is a lot more work involved for governors when schools are struggling. So that's something to weigh up, that you've definitely got the time commitment to put into that, because you don't want to be letting people down. But I would definitely encourage people to do it, because it's a great way to be involved. You don't get paid for it, which is, in some ways maybe a drawback, but in some ways is a positive, because it's not a relationship where you're an employee. You've got a very different relationship where you're doing this because you choose to, and you're doing this because you're doing it for the right moral reasons, really, rather than just doing it because, you get paid for it. Not that you do that anyway for your job, because everyone just puts a lot more into the job than that, but it's a different sort of relationship. So I would definitely encourage people to do it, because you learn from it as well. And it's a great thing to do as well as you progress. A lot of people do become governors later in life. Some do it when they've retired. So it's a great job for teachers when they've retired to stay involved. In the school where I'm at now, where I lead, most of our senior leadership team are governors of local schools, particularly the local primary schools. And that's a great way to build links between schools as well. to see things from a different perspective.
Yeah. Yes, I did hear somebody say once, Peter, about being a governor. It's one of the best jobs in the world. The only thing is the pay is pretty
Yeah.
poor. And that is important. There isn't any pay. No.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So finally, Peter, when you're not being a head teacher or a governor and so on, how do you like to unwind? I guess the family are going to be important. Do you keep up with your music? I wondered what are the things that help you relax?
Definitely, yeah. I don't play as much as I should do with the music. It's one of my ambitions to get started again. I did a few years ago. Me and a group, when my children were at primary school, a group of parents got together and we had a bit of a folk group. So we played quite a bit then, but not now. If anyone's out there listening who wants to form a band, get in touch with me. You can join in with the midlife crisis with me. But what I would do now, I do a lot of cooking. I'm the main cook at home, mainly because I enjoy it. When I get home, I'm not somebody I do a lot of reading. I read a lot. I enjoy reading. I like following politics a lot. So I listen to a lot of podcasts around politics. I follow Manchester United, which is a very depressing pastime. Don't go anymore to the games, but I kind of watch them on the telly and listen to podcasts and get depressed about them. And I say I read a lot, and gardening. I do quite a lot of gardening as well. That's another sort of hobby that I've got. But mainly, you're right, it's family. My children are older now. They're either at sixth form, end of school, or university, but they're still you're still very, very involved in those years. And there's a lot of time spent with them, which I love, but it's also a lot of problem solving from time to time, which you have to do as well as a parent. So that's what I do, really.
That's great, Peter. Peter, thank you for your time today, and thank you for all the work that you do as Chair of Governors at Melland Local Governing Body.
Not at all.
Bye for now. Thank you very much.
Really
Bye for now.
Thank you, Chris. Bye now.